It seems like in modern times we're being dealt a lot more bad news than there is good news. One day your internet hero dons the cape of your inspiration, and the next he's caught taking the wrong bus home and diddling kids in the back alley. It's true what they say. Nowadays you either die a hero or live long enough to become a pedophile. But with this, I decided let's do some good news.
Good news, everyone!
And what is this good news I bring to you on this merry day? The fact that Velma has been cancelled after 2 seasons with no chance of a revival for a 3rd season. Praise God, Buddha, and Colonel Sanders, I thought we'd never see the day. Our first red flag about this show being terrible is that it was written by Mindy Kaling, of all people, someone who had a really good run on The Office, and that was about it. Other than that, Mindy failed to break out time and time again in Hollywood, only to use her name and connections that she had in Hollywood to get Velma greenlit in the first place. And it didn't start off on the right foot because Velma's advertisement really tried to stick it to anyone who thought this was going to be like the original Scooby-Doo cartoons, where it's like, oh, people are going to complain about Black Velma and the fact that she's a lesbian, and check out all this irony that we're doing. Not really starting off on a good foot, trying to distance yourself from a potential audience. Usually what you want to do is try and sell yourself the best you can, even if what you're selling is a pile of horse shit. You know how your brain will block out certain memories from your past to protect you from trauma that you've dealt with? That's what I got with Velma. It seems that every memory I had about watching this show just simply was up and gone one day, like my dad going out for cigarettes. It seems that no matter what, I can't really pin down any concrete storylines or things that I complained about with this show. But I do remember one big thing about this show I never liked, among the handful of episodes that I did see, because God forbid I'm not sitting through 2 seasons of this crap. And that was the humor. I get that comedy is subjective at the end of the day, and I also want to say that if you want to make a mature IP off of the, Scooby-Doo universe, by all means you can do that. There are people who have done it on YouTube a lot better than this, but this was just, again, so plainly spiteful, it was obvious that they weren't trying to appeal to the people who actually did like Scooby-Doo. That being said, going into what I hate about this. I hate the comedy. That is my number one gripe with this, and I get that comedy is subjective at the end of the day. But this comedy is on par with Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, where it's meant to just be shock humor, and I find that to be the laziest form of humor, where it's like, Velma said jizz, Velma said come, Velma said a swear word, and it's supposed to be funny because Velma would never do that. One of the more infamous jokes of this series that you probably remember from the advertisements they put out was one where Velma's trying to get arrested so that she can talk to Fred while he's in jail. And to do this, she goes up to cops in their cop car and starts labeling everything people hate about cops, how they're pig-headed and stupid, how they're, too dumb to do their job, but none of that teeters them over the edge. What teeters them over the edge is saying, oh, and The Sopranos suck. Because you get it, it's irony. The Sopranos is actually a really good show. It's critically acclaimed. It won awards. There's the funny. Why aren't you laughing? And I think it's at that moment I checked out of the show just because you knew exactly what you were getting from that point on. The comedy wasn't going to divert from this path of just being in-your-face, ha-ha, shock humor, and it just got really boring and bland from that point on. Honestly, not even the people who wrote the articles about Velma being canceled gave a damn enough to actually give storylines or creative thoughts about the show. They simply said it was created by Mindy Kaling, HBO Max is pulling the plug, and here's a long list of people who starred alongside them. It's such a bare bones article that it shows no one really gave a damn about Velma, and no one ever did. Whatever audience it did have was minuscule. I'm talking triple to double digits. But just like Mindy Kaling, this show isn't going out quietly. It's going out loud, kicking and screaming, and biting a few people along the way. Because as this show got canceled over Twitter, a lot of people started debating whether we should be celebrating the downfall of Velma, mainly because of the hardworking animators who were hired for this specific job. And now because this show is canceled, they no longer have a job. So that asks the question, is it morally just for us to sit here and laugh at the demise of a show when people are losing their jobs over it? The short answer is no. It's not wrong to laugh at this show for failing, mainly because the ones who are laughing at it aren't laughing at people losing their jobs, rather than a show that was built on spite and hubris getting the conclusion and funeral it deserves, with no one giving a damn about it. But there is a huge concern when it comes to the animation industry as a whole, especially when they use terms like collapsing to define the industry nowadays. There's a video I watched before all this called Is the Animation Industry Dying by Lisa Singer, and I highly recommend checking it out because it's her own personal experience of being an animator in modern times, working through COVID and the boom they faced then, to what it's like nowadays. But the TLDR of the whole animation collapse is that there's a lot of demons going on in that industry that make it near impossible to have a career in animation nowadays unless you do it freelance on things like YouTube with the support of a Patreon. And with the industry outsourcing to countries with cheaper labor, impacts of streaming services on content productions, as well as the threat of generative AI taking a lot of people's jobs away, it makes it nearly impossible, at least here in the West, to have a job that's sustainable in animation, which is why you seem to go through a lot of ideas that get suggested but turned down, and the ideas that do make it don't last that long in the industry. It's more about just trying to get money off of an IP than it is trying to create something long term. It's about the here and now and not the longevity of it. One final point I want to talk on is the Japanese animation scene, because people sometimes use this as a crutch or straw man argument against the animation industry collapsing, saying that just because anime is popular and it's going through a huge boom right now in popularity, meaning that there's going to be some sort of revival or renaissance in animation's industry, when in reality, being an animator in Japan is quite cruel. In 2019, the New York Times actually followed a man named Mr. Akutsu, who is a top animator in Japan, and he gets paid $1,400 to $3,800 for working every possible hour he can a month. Now, to keep that in perspective, that's a max of $45,000 a year as a top paid animator. But the quote-unquote low-rung illustrators who do grueling piecework for as little as $200 a month but equal the hours. And this is just how the industry's been, where a lot of people get into it and then they have to put in grueling hours to try and strive and survive. In the end, there is no surviving this because it's a machine that constantly is pumping out new projects, and these people have to work ungodly hours to meet deadlines that seem unhuman or unrealistic. There has never been a time where animation was easy, or could be said about any job, but if there's ever a industry that shows how dangerous the human life can be, it's animation for the things these people have to do just to do something they love. But remember how I said Mr. Akatsu makes around $45,000 a year? Compared to a US animator, that's $20,000 short, or even $30,000 short of what Americans make. The average American animator makes around $65,000 a year or more, and more advanced work pays around the $75K limit. But that being said, what is the actual solution to the animation industry collapse? In all honesty, in my perspective, it has to be taking risks. There has to be someone on these higher up in companies that are willing to take risks, not on these small greenlight projects that are handed to them by people who have connections in Hollywood, but have actual creativity and will want to sit down with animators and storyboard artists and create something that people will actually enjoy. But again, in these trying times, no one's creative, no one wants to take risks, and because of this, no one's going to save an industry that's slowly watching the ground crumble below its feet. The animation industry could be saved just by simply bringing in people who will do the necessities to bring a good product to entertain people. It's like that old saying, if you build it, they will come. And the same goes for animation and good animated series and movies.